Hey everybody, Kara Castronova here at the office of Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, talking about so many important things and all the great work that you're doing. But right now, everybody is talking about Arctic frost. This is just breaking how sweeping this investigation was. To me, it sounds like almost a general warrant, which is illegal. Can you tell us a little bit more about Arctic frost and your opinions on it and everything that's come out?
First of all, welcome to my office here, Kara. No, the Arctic frost was an outrageous weaponization and politicization of the Justice Department and the FBI. You can't even really put it into words. We just had a press conference with Senator Grassley as we released 1,700 pages, 197 different subpoenas that went out under Jack Frost. And I said, this is an enemies list. If you remember, you're probably too young, but I'm old enough to remember the Nixon enemies list. I mean, that was it was a poisonous term.
Right.
It's like it was outrageous that the President of the United States would have an enemies list. He had a list. They weaponized and used that list against Americans. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. I know through whistleblowers. It was revealed that 8 senators, 1 House member had our telephone records seized,
Right.
which is an outrageous violation of separation of powers. But now we're looking at literally hundreds of people that were on that enemies list, and again, there aren't any Democrats.
Right.
It's anybody associated with Donald Trump or the Republican Party, and including obviously Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, but the Republican Governors Association.
Right.
Was on that list. I mean, these are attorneys.
Right.
These are the chief law enforcement officers of their states. And as Eric Schmidt said in our press conference, attorneys generals that were suing the Biden administration and winning time after time after time, and so they were targeted for investigation.
Right.
No, this is outrageous. Watergate, the IRS, Tea Party tax exempt status scandals, they pale in comparison. This is orders of magnitude worse than those 2 scandals.
It is, and there's so many questions that I have. I know that you were one of the people in 2020 that was asking for election transparency, and it seems like a lot of stuff that's happened since then when it comes to weaponization all revolved completely around anybody that wanted fair and free elections and that wanted an investigation. And I guess fast forwarding 5 years, it seems like, were they hiding something? And I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but why did they go to such an extent to arrest 2,500 Trump supporters? These are regular people now. They're not senators. They're not Congress people. To spy on senators like yourself, to spy on Congress people, to spy on actually My Pillow and Mike Lindell and Rudy Giuliani and all of these others. Like, why do you think they went to such an extent to do that?
Because they want power and they want to destroy their political opposition. And they'll go to any length to do so. What they did to people who were just in Washington, D.C., the way they weaponized the agencies against those individuals. Now, listen, we all condemn the violence. I think there are plenty of people that did commit acts of violence that should have been arrested, prosecuted, and punished, okay? I don't have a beef with that, but the SWAT-like raids on people who just showed up, grandmas and grandpas, I mean, it was outrageous what the Biden administration did. Not to mention the waste of resources. Rather than arresting criminals, trying to prevent the murders and rapes because of the illegal immigrants they let into this country, through their open borders, rather than have the FBI, federal law enforcement try and protect and keep Americans safe, they weaponize them against their political opponents. And you know exactly how Joe Biden felt about half of America.
Right.
Trump, MAGA Republicans, they represent the threat to democracy.
Well, domestic terrorists is what he said.
Yeah.
He used that word often enough. Joe Biden, did you know him well when he was in office?
No.
You didn't really?
No, as vice president, I met with him a number of times.
Right.
He was very gracious. I always used to refer to him, in an organization, he'd be the sales manager. He'd be the guy that was a pretty good golfer, knew how to yuck it up with people. He's a very
Right.
engaging individual from that standpoint, but he's also thoroughly corrupt and, as we found out, unbelievably mean. I mean, this weaponization of the federal government, this wasn't his underlings. This was directed from the top.
Really? So that's what
I
was
so.
getting to. I was wondering if you thought was it really Joe Biden or was it his underlings that was doing this? And the concern, and I know you've expressed this before, that if we don't do something now, meaning the people of the United States and our representatives, about this weaponization, what's going to happen if another person like Joe Biden, whether they be Republican or Democrat, gets into office that can totally weaponize these departments again. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, the partisans that are burrowed into these agencies, they're waiting out Donald Trump. They'll rise to the surface, and all the other partisan actors will go flooding back into these agencies. So we can't afford to lose. But a quick summary of this. We talked about Biden. I mean, this starts with Hillary Clinton. Her political dirty trick with the Steele dossier, weaponized by President Obama. They knew full well this was a political dirty trick. John Brennan, James Clapper, Joe Biden. All these people knew exactly what they were doing. They knew how false the Russian collusion hoax was. But they used it, and then, of course, they have their complicit members of the media, the compliant and complicit legacy or lamestream media, carries their water. You notice that not one, the Washington Post hasn't given back their Pulitzer Prize for their groundbreaking reporting on the Russian collusion hoax.
Right.
They ought to give that back, thoroughly embarrassed, and they ought to out all the people that provided them and fed them false information.
You're a senator, so you have a lot of power, and I know you've done really important hearings regarding COVID, but would there ever be, and I don't know the answer to this, this is a question I just thought of, an investigation into activist judges or judges that were completely okay with what happened under Joe Biden when it came to political persecution? Well,
coming from that press conference, Senator Cruz got his subpoena. He also got a court order. I forget the judge's name, Judge Boasberg. Basically issued an order to AT&T not to let Ted Cruz know that they tried to subpoena his telephone records. And the reason given, and this is a paraphrase, is, we believe Senator Cruz would destroy evidence. It's just.
So they basically hide evidence.
Well, what I'm saying, it's slander against Senator Cruz.
Right.
I mean, AT&T should have been able to let Senator Cruz know, hey, you realize the Justice Department is after your phone records. Now, AT&T, to their credit, unlike Verizon, AT&T did not give those phone records to the Justice Department. Verizon gave my phone records and, again, 8 other members of Congress's phone records over to the Jack Smith investigation.
So do you ever foresee maybe putting a judge on the bench and just even asking questions, a Senate committee hearing of a judge? They're not, that's the third, they don't get check and balance.
So you do have a separation of powers issue there. But what was suggested in that press conference is this is grounds for impeachment.
Right.
I mean, you need reasonable cause to do what that judge ordered.
Right.
And again, I'm not an attorney, but we've got excellent Republican members on the Judiciary Committee. We've got good folks in Jim Jordan in the House.
Right.
It wouldn't surprise me if the House started some impeachment proceedings against at least that judge.
Right. The reason I ask is because a lot of people I talk to feel like it's just this sort of invisible arm of the government. Everybody knows Congress and the president, but they're sort of never getting questioned. So that's concerning.
Quite honestly, they should be reasonably invisible. They shouldn't be politicizing the third branch of government.
Right.
They should be applying the law. They should be calling balls and strikes. They shouldn't be,
siding with parties.
Right. And that's exactly what this judge has done.
Right. So just to go back to really ARTIC Frost one more time, because we are really deeply interested in this, and so is our audience. If you could just really summarize the atrocities that were committed, just so the American people understand. I know this is really getting downplayed somewhat in certain mainstream media outlets. Why is ARTIC Frost so scary, and why should the American people know about this?
Well, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. So it's kind of difficult to tell you that. But again, there are hundreds of people on their enemies list. They issued, now we know, close to 200 subpoenas. And again, these weren't targeted subpoenas. These were everything but, the kitchen sink.
Right.
Truly an abuse of power.
Right.
For what purpose? It seems like, one of the main parts of the investigation was the alternate electors, which they call the fake elector scheme. This is what JFK did, helped him become president. They challenged results in Hawaii. His attorneys appropriately said, well, we should have an alternate slate of electors in case we prevail in this case. Good thing they did, because when he won the case in Hawaii, he had the electors to vote for him for president. Now, Al Gore did not do that, so the Supreme Court took the case up and said, well, you don't even have an alternate slate of electors. No matter how good your case is, you lose. So, for example, Judge Troops in Wisconsin, probably the best election lawyer, man of incredible integrity, represented President Trump in all the irregularities in the Wisconsin election in 2020. I mean, there were so many irregularities, that should have been investigated. So Judge Troupas appropriately said, we need an alternate slate of electors. A lot of members of, county parties of the Republican Party agreed to be that alternate slate. So those, 38 Wisconsinites, including those electors,
Right.
a lot of people I know, God-fearing, country-loving, law enforcement respecting individuals, they were on that list. They were on that. I mean, give me a break. Together again with as you said, the people just here in Washington, D.C., and by geolocating their cell phones, they became target of an unbelievable prosecution and persecution by the Justice Department under Biden.
Right. And what do you have to say? I guess I know it's pretty obvious that now the mainstream media, and it's frustrating for me because the power pendulum does swing. This is my personal belief that I don't think that there's weaponization right now. I think they're going after people that weaponized, but people are screaming that the DOJ is being weaponized. What are your thoughts on that?
Nothing can be further from the truth.
Right.
Again, I think Eric Schmidt did a good job in the Judiciary Committee with Attorney General Pam Bondi. He said, when you're actually prosecuting people who illegally weaponized the Justice
Right.
Department before,
Right.
that's not weaponizing the agency. That's called law enforcement.
Right.
In Wisconsin, we just had a big FBI bust of drug rings. God bless Cash Patel. He's actually using the FBI to investigate and prosecute crimes.
Right.
That's what the FBI's job is, not be turned loose on your political opponents.
One last question regarding Arctic Frost. I believe I heard that the January 6th committee was sort of involved in some way. They were communicating
Sure, it
with
looks
them.
that way, yeah. And listen, it's not, just as a general rule, it's not improper, for
Right.
example, Congress to refer criminal matters to the
Right.
Justice Department to provide, here's the evidence we have, turn that over. But the type of cooperation, well, first of all, just the corruption of the January 6th committee.
Right.
I mean, it was not a proper committee.
Right.
It did not have proper representation from the minority side. It itself was a witch hunt.
Right.
And if you want evidence of that, they destroyed all the evidence.
Right.
They destroyed everything so it couldn't be used as evidence against them. So no, the January 6th committee itself was a thoroughly corrupt
Right.
undertaking. Slick, they hired professional producers to produce the event,
Right.
videos, that type of thing. Thoroughly corrupt.
What do you want the new J6 committee to look into? Your 3 top wish list for the new J6 committee under Loudermilk, who we spoke to yesterday.
Well, first of all, try and recover that evidence so
Right.
we know exactly
Right.
how corrupt that thing was. In the end, it's all about exposure.
Right.
I know, a lot of people want to see people go to jail, okay? And I think criminals ought to go to jail. That's going to be a very unsatisfying result, though, because when you consider the damage done to our country, to our democracy,
Right.
to our election system by people like James Comey, Brennan, Clapper, that whole cast of characters that push forward the Russian collusion hoax. Again, I'm not a prosecutor. I don't know what crimes they could be charged with, what the penalties would be, but there's no penalty that would even come close to making up for the damage they've done to our country. I mean,
Right.
Russia and China could only dream of impacting our elections just to a fraction of what these folks have done.
Right.
So it is, so again, I'm all about public exposure. I've called on Cash Patel and Pam Bondi, don't appoint a special counsel, don't start a criminal investigation, do a robust internal investigation for the purpose of turning the documents, identify the individuals over to Congress. We can do transcribed interviews, we can hold hearings, we can expose this so the American public knows exactly what happened. If we turn these in criminal proceedings right away, all of a sudden they can't turn anything over to Congress. If they don't indict on all the wrongdoing, all those other records probably get sealed. We never get
Right.
to see them. They never see the light of day. So I'm not right now. I am not interested in a criminal investigation.
Right.
I'm interested in
Just getting to the truth?
yes. I'm full exposure to the American public,
Right.
and that happens through Congress.
Right. A lot of people I speak to, mothers especially, are very grateful for the work that you do when it comes to transparency with pharmaceuticals. You've done a lot of hearings. I've actually covered a few of them. Can you tell me why that's so dear to your heart?
Well, during COVID, I was chairman of Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and nobody else was holding hearings on the things I thought we should have been
Right.
holding hearings on. What are we doing in terms of early treatment? I was at the forefront of trying to make sure that the hydroxychloroquine that was in the national stockpile got distributed. there was a big log jam there. I was talking to the Novartis, the people donated like 30 million tablets. They're undergoing all these studies on hydroxychloroquine. All of a sudden, they went dark at the end of April. What happened here? Then I held hearings with people like Dr. Peter McCulloch and on hydroxychloroquine, but then Pierre Corey on ivermectin. Their careers got destroyed because they were just talking about something that could have helped people.
Right.
Why not give it a shot? I mean, both drugs are incredibly safe, but FDA was sabotaging. Remember the deal on ivermectin? Come on, y'all, you're not a horse.
Right.
It's a Nobel Prize-winning drug. What is going on here? Plus, because of my advocacy, I got in contact with Dr. Michael Yeadon, who has worked for Pfizer for 30 years, ended up a senior vice president of research. His background's in toxicology. Before the shots, the injections ever got emergency use authorization, I was talking to him, and he was beside himself. He could not believe what his colleagues were doing. He said, Ron, I was educated with them. I know what they know. I know they're lying to us. I know they know they're lying to us.
Right.
Then he just went through exactly what he was talking about. I mean, it will not stay in your arm, the injection. It's encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle, which is designed to difficult to permeate barriers. So it's not going to stay in the arm. It's going to biodistribute all over the place. And it's not a vaccine. It's gene therapy. It's going to deliver that lipid nanoparticle with the modified RNA. It's not real mRNA that degrades quickly. It's modified so it doesn't degrade.
Right.
That mRNA enters the cell, turns the cell into a factory of something that is toxic to the body. When that happens, if it's attached to a heart cell, the body attacks the heart. That's called myocarditis, or the neurological system. If it would have just stayed in the arm, okay, you could maybe make a case. Okay, you develop antibodies. What inflammation you get there from the body attacking it before it produces the antibody? Okay, no harm done. But they knew it wouldn't stay in the arm. They had biodistribution studies, which they hid until Japanese regulators found it. So again, I could go on for hours about this, but I mean, what I saw during COVID in 2020 made no sense whatsoever. And then when I saw the covering up of what the Veyer system, which they touted in October 2020, and now it was showing the safety signals, screaming safety signals at them, and they were now criticizing Veyer, saying, well, you can't trust that. These are false reports. I mean, so it was obvious it was thoroughly corrupt. And that's what's opened my eyes up to the corruption, the capture of the federal health agencies, and let's face it, the corruption and capture of all federal government agencies.
What was that with that? Like, looking back into 2021 and 2020 during COVID, what was the frenzy about? Why were people being canceled? Like everything you just spoke about, this dangerous shot. Like, what do you think was the motivating factor behind all of that? I still try to think about it to this day.
I mean, I hate to say it,
profit. Just profit?
Yeah, because medicine has devolved into basically a financing scheme. You have, Obamacare has hastened the consolidation of the medical establishment. So you have fewer, but you have very large hospital associations. You have few but very large insurance companies. The more things cost, the more they make.
Right.
Generally, people make a percentage off a sale, right? So you're better off selling something that costs $100 versus something that costs $50. So there's absolutely no incentive whatsoever to produce a medical product, a drug, a procedure that's cheap. The best thing is the more expensive, the better. And when somebody else is paying for it, when you have the federal government just throwing money at the problem, when you have third-party even insurers, I mean, they're going to make more money off of a $10,000 policy than they will off a $5,000 policy, right? So all along the chain, people are incentivized for having as high a cost as possible because there's not free market competition. You have no idea when you go to the doctor what a procedure is going to cost. You have no idea. Right. And the doctor doesn't know. It's the people in the accounting department. So, I mean, that's just a basic fact of life. So that corruption of the free market system, we've removed all those disciplines that, free market generally guarantees the lowest possible price and cost, the best possible quality, best possible level of customer service. That's what free market provides. We don't have that in medicine. Right. And so the actors within the health system, they know how to game the system. Drug companies, they do everything possible to sabotage the use of cheap generic therapies. Right. Whether it's nutraceuticals, whether it's things like ivermectin, pennies a tablet. Right. They would much rather, for example, on cancer, these incredibly expensive chemotherapy treatments. keep the patient alive long enough, keep pumping expensive chemotherapy, you make a lot of money.
Right.
The last thing they're going to want to see is a very simple molecule that's proven safe and effective. So they'll do everything to destroy them. So they've done it. They've done it time and time again. Pierre Corey has written, now the second book's coming out. His first book was War on Ivermectin, which I'd recommend to all your listeners. Just read that book. It's well written. It's a quick read. He's come out with a new one. He's going to be coming out with one called The War on Chlorine Dioxide, which sounds chlorine, right?
Right.
That's what they pinned on Trump. We basically disinfect all of our water with chlorine dioxide because it's so much more effective. It's so much safer than chlorine.
Right.
It has a total different. It was termed by NASA as the universal antidote. So again, I know I'm kind of rambling on here.
No, this is
other
fascinating
areas.
stuff, and thank you for like everything that you've done. I know that you're a little bit pressed for time, right? He's pressed for time.
Well, I guess so, but
But,
again, but it's an important point to conclude here. You have to look at the corruption of our medical system. I love doctors, love nurses. They saved my daughter's life, but we've corrupted the industry, and I believe there's so many cures out there that are being suppressed and sabotaged.
Would you agree that science is one of the easiest things to manipulate when it comes to climate change, when it comes to vaccines? The general population doesn't understand
when
science.
you pay for research, you get the result you want.
Right.
Time and time again. So no, and that's the core problem here. Science has been corrupted.
Any information on when the shutdown will be over? Your colleagues, will they vote
I'm
to open the
trying
government?
to, at a minimum, get workers paid. The real solution is the Eliminate Shutdowns Act.
Right.
Unfortunately, that failed. Hopefully, we can get another shot at it because that is the solution. Just end shutdowns forever. Quit using people as pawns in your game to pass massive appropriation bills that we can't pay for.
Well, thank you so much for all the great work that you do for America, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.